All right, welcome everyone to the January 5th meeting of the Kamloops Amateur Radio Club. Welcome to all our guests. We've got quite a few people on Zoom. Ian asked me to give a little intro and just to explain to people how we got to where we are tonight, and so you have some context of what tonight's about. Our club, the Kamloops Amateur Radio Club, has been very fortunate to have the support of a number of organizations down at the coast, VE7SCC, the Coquitlam Club, BCWARN, and for us here in the interior, the BCWARN has really allowed the Kamloops Club to really build out our network and do some really neat things. And for those that don't know, the BCWARN is an amateur radio network that supports both ham radio enthusiasts, but it's also a network that can be used for emergency communications if that need arose. So for the BCWARN and clubs such as us and the Coquitlam Club and New West and others around the province, there's a whole bunch of people in the ham world that are building these exciting and cutting edge networks in radio infrastructure. And these can be important alternatives to the typical commercial networks that are used by emergency program managers. So tonight we're super fortunate to have the folks at the Coquitlam Club to give us an up close and personal tour of their station, their facilities, and how all that benefits not only their club members, but amateur radio operators around the province and organizations such as the City of Coquitlam and CFARS. Just want to remind people that during the meeting, we have the video and audio muted. So if you have a question, you can put it into the chat window. And I'm assured by Ian that he has a team of technical specialists willing to answer questions. And or you can hold them till the end. We'll have a more interactive Q&A session at the end once the presentation from the Coquitlam folks is over. And for those of us who are from the Kamloops Club, once the presentation is over and we wrapped up Q&A, then what we'll do is we'll just break into the club meeting here in the room, and we won't continue with that on. Someone, if they can grab the door, thank you. We'll continue with our regular business afterwards. And at that, I'm going to turn things over to Phil, VE7 Kilo Juliet Romeo, for his introduction, and I'm going to mute our Zoom feed and turn us over to the high def feed. So over to you, Phil.
Well, good evening, Miles, and good evening to everyone at the club. Thanks for joining us on our virtual tour of the club. I'm going to give you a bit of a history background before we kick things off, but first I wanted to introduce two members in the meeting room here directly in front of me, onto the left of your screen, would be Richard, VE7RLW. He's been a past president, director, and is currently our secretary. Next to Richard is Neil King, call sign is VE7 Delta X-ray. Neil is an avid DXer. He's been on many DXpeditions around the world, and Neil will be giving a talk about our facilities on the outside of the building, the towers, the construction off the towers, and the antennas that are on the towers. And if Aaron joins us, Aaron is with the Canadian Armed Forces and is currently the national manager. He's not here yet, but if he comes, he will join us in the meeting room. Keith Whitney, call sign VE7 Kilo Whiskey, is down in the meeting room. Keith is another avid DXer and has been on many DXpeditions around the world. Darryl, VE7 Echo Victor Romeo, is our main CFARS radio operator at the club, and both him and Keith will be available to answer any questions you might have at the end of our presentation. So to give you a little bit of background on the club here, VE7 Sierra Charlie Charlie. The club was founded in 1991 and is now 32 years old. Originally, the club was known as the Coquitlam Senior Amateur Radio Emergency Services Society and was founded by Mr. Ed Calderwood, VE7 Bravo Quebec Mike. Now, Ed passed away, I guess it's about a year ago or so, so we have a lot of thanks to give Ed for getting the seed planted, and here's where we're at today. We reworked our constitution and opened the organization up to everyone licensed and unlicensed in 2001. And the club was moved to the Riverview facility, now known as the place of the Great Blue Heron, in 1992. It is the best location in Coquitlam for what we do. It's called the Stanley Park of Coquitlam. There's 200 plus acres and provides a bit of an RF shield between us and nearby residents. You can imagine all the RF generated in homes. The club itself, our portion here, has over 4,000 square feet of interior space. We have the equivalent of about 3 acres on the outside, which we need for our towers and antennas. On a good year, we have had around 70 to 80 members. Established members have 24/7 access to the club facility. Tonight's virtual tour will focus on the technical aspects of the station we have built over the last 10 years. To keep to time, we will gladly respond to any text questions you may have in the chat window. And time permitting, at the end, we may also address any questions verbally. And to kick things off, I'd like to throw it over to Richard, VA7RLW, our club's emergency coordinator and chief instructor and examiner.
Hi everybody, my name is Richard. Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much. I'm the club's current secretary as well. So KARC, Coquitlam Amateur Radio Emergency Services Society, we have a mandate to provide backup emergency communication services to the city of Coquitlam in the event of a major disaster such as an earthquake. We have an exceptional relationship with the city's Risk and Emergency Management Department. Part of our many activities within the city is to plan, test, and use the various amateur radio equipment deployed at the EOC locations, and Coquitlam has several of them right now. We have also been very fortunate to apply for and receive grants from the city that allow us to purchase the various equipment that you will see during this presentation. My other roles within the club is, as Phil indicated, I'm a course instructor as well as an ISED accredited examiner. And with our newly enhanced audio-video capabilities, we plan to resume offering courses, but this time online. This will help us to reach out to a wider group and not rely on in-person attendance at our facilities. With that, I will now hand it over to Neil.
Okay. Thanks very much, Richard. All right. Well, what we're going to do is take a look at what the outside infrastructure is, towers, antennas, and that sort of thing, and a little bit of background on how we put it all together. And I'm filling in blank space here. There we go. All right, we have our first graphic up. Basically, this is the club layout looking at it from Google Earth. We have about 500 feet of separation between Tower 1 and Tower 2. Looking at it from a drone standpoint, you can actually get a really good sense of the antennas that we have up on Tower 1. We're passing over now Tower 2, which is adjacent to the building. And off in the distance, Tower 3. We have 2 full-size quads running 2 elements on 40, 30, and 4 elements on everything else. On Tower 3, we have a 5-element 20-meter Yagi, and on top of that is a 6-element 6-meter beam. A 7-element 6-meter beam. Below that is a fixed mount TH7. We also have a couple of wire antennas, which are run off of each of the towers. Putting this thing together required an awful lot of work. As you can see, we had dug a big hole, lots of rebar, and just as a matter of interest, we put in 10 yards of concrete on each tower, and then another 9 yards, of crush on top of that. Everything was grounded, as you can see here. Quite, we don't see a lot of lightning here, but when you've got that much metal in the air, you really want to make sure that you're not going to see sparks flying out of your equipment. The antennas themselves we assembled, And a lot of time was spent making sure that everything fit properly, that it was properly aligned. We also spent considerable time looking at how to support the antennas, the rotators. We used a series of plates which provided bearings to support the weight of the antennas. The quads, by the way, are about 170 pounds each. The 6-meter beam and the 5-element 20 are actually quite a bit lighter. Dial gauge was used to make sure that we weren't wobbling too much. The guys spent a lot of time making sure that that worked. And you can see from the happy faces that they're happy with the result. To put the quads up was quite a task. We had to elevate the boom at 22 feet off the ground to make sure that the tips of the 40-meter and 30-meter elements were able to clear the ground without too much difficulty. The elements were assembled on the ground, fully wired up, and then we lifted those into place. As you can imagine, putting the two inner elements, which are 20 through 10, in amongst the scaffolding was an interesting exercise, but we managed to get it all done, and everything was put together. The size of these can't be underestimated. They're absolutely gigantic. For our Tower 2 installation, we actually brought a crane in to bring the quad up. This is footage from a helmet cam that Ian is wearing. Carlos also was assisting in that. This is the Tower 3 actually being lifted into position. And you can see up in the upper right is the 5-element 20-meter monobander. A dizzying exercise. But everything went very well. And in this particular case, it wasn't raining. It always seems when you're doing antenna work or tower work, it's pouring rain or snowing. This is the size. You can get an idea of the size of the 20M5. It's an excellent antenna. We also used the crane to raise it into position and did the same as well with the 7-element 6-meter beam. We used a different technique actually on Tower 1. We used a capstan winch to bring the quad up to the top. It was amazingly simple. The key thing was that we built this quad at the base of the tower, so just winching it was a straight up exercise.
Okay, we need to square it up here, guys. Square it up.
Still a lot of people involved in making sure it got up to the top okay.
So, Dan, you gotta walk back towards me a bit.
This is what happens when it rains, and it's a pretty messy day, but this is the Tower 2 quad, and it was relatively straightforward to get it up, but we ended up having to relocate our 2-meter UHF antenna to be able to fit it in properly without screwing anything up. The quads use a switching system. We have one feed line going from the operating room to the top of the tower. This is an ACOM switch, 10 position, and individual feed lines going to each driven element. We ended up having to replace this rotor. It broke on us. But it's all about having the right tool for the job, isn't it?
Well, it's the far side is one Sam. There you go.
Called it a f***ing hammer. That's not a f***ing hammer.
Yeah, having the right tool for the job. So we replaced that with a Prosotel rotor, which has considerably more capacity, and given that we got 30 plus square feet of wind loading on the quads, this thing actually does the job. We have a Yaesu 2800, which is on Tower 1. We damaged one through some wind loading, but it seems to be doing okay at this point. And here's another shot. In between Tower 1 and Tower 2, we have an 80-meter dipole and are also stringing the coax cables that run from each. On T3, in addition to the rotatable 2 antennas, the fixed location antenna, we also have an 80-40 Kellerman dipole, which gives us some additional diversity from the 80-meter and 40-meter antennas that we have on T1 and T2. A lot of coax goes into feeding these.
2 kilometers.
Yeah, we had 2 kilometers roughly of thanks, Phil. 2 kilometers of hardline, which we installed, running between T1 and T2. We also terminated everything at each tower. We terminated in these boxes, providing protection for not only the coax but also computer wiring, and which we have run out to each tower, and surge protection. So lightning strikes. It minimizes the damage. You never get away from it totally. We have Wi-Fi, which, as you can see, the box with the 3 antennas on the bottom, plus we have video cameras here in the building and also outside, so we've got pretty good surveillance. This is the actual final coax run that goes into the building and the operating site itself. Everything goes through a gland to try and protect everything from moisture penetration. We have an antenna tuner. It's actually an automatic antenna tuner. Zap it with a little bit of RF and it tunes the appropriate frequency. This is the actual antenna tuner itself, and it was located in a box which we put up on T2 in an environmentally protected and a heated box to just keep temperature stability. That box was mounted, as I say, on Tower 2. There is a remote unit which is located in the operating room itself, which provides us the ability to, as I say, just give it a zap of RF and it tunes the antenna to the proper frequency. Okie dokie, that's pretty much our exterior shot. So we'll hand it over to Ian, who will give you a good tour of what our operating location is like, and you get a sense of what happens inside.
Okay, thanks, Neil. So yeah, as you come into the radio room here, the first thing you'll notice is there's 2 cable trays. The top tray in this room is bringing all the cables in from the outside, and the bottom tray is distributing everything out to the stations. So that's all done here on this patch panel. This patch panel is basically a totally mechanical analog thing in this room. So we have our antennas coming in here and our radios and different operating positions down here. It's important to note that we have 2 drops to a lot of the radios in this room. We also have drops to other parts of the station, for example, the meeting room and the shop, in case we need to patch antennas down there. This is where we bring all of our rotators in. We're a big fan of using a lot of DIN rail around here. So behind these panel blanks is DIN rail, where all the rotators come in, and then there are short whips down to the rotator controllers. Again, for serviceability, everything's on short whips and easily traceable. These are all the patches to the stations. So these are Ethernet patches. Ethernet as well as other signals. We can patch audio to different stations if we need to, PTT signals, etc. between amplifiers. So we have 4 Cat5e drops to every station. Just down a little further here is our APRS and WinLink gateway on VHF packet radio. Over here, this is kind of the IT rack. This is where we bring all the cables from the outside runs for our outside Wi-Fi and outside PoE antenna switches. Bring them into here, and this is basically a BCWARN core switch. This is a Cisco 3750X. For those of you that don't know, BCWARN has an agreement with the University of British Columbia whereby basically we get 2nd generation enterprise gear that would otherwise be going to e-cycling. So this is a few years old, but totally adequate for what we're doing here. It's a gigabit Ethernet switch with 10 gigabit fiber links. Down below is a rack of or tray of PoE injectors. These are handling our outdoor APs and some of our security cameras outside, and just some other spare stuff down here, DC power supply for a lot of the 12-volt things in the rack. This rack here is rack 3. It's almost exclusively used by position 4, kind of our main HF position we have at the station. Any of you have heard us on the BC Public Service Net, you've heard us through this audio chain. This is basically an Orban Optimod 9300, which is a broadcast audio processor. Provides about 25 dB of compression that you can't really hear working when compared to that same level of compression on a traditional sideband radio. So that's what that is. Up here is its analog predecessor. It's a backup right now. Originally we're running this to begin with. This at the top is actually an auto tuner that is currently out of service. We're doing some work on this, but in the exterior tour, you might have seen the box on tower 2. This is actually the remote head for that tuner. So the tuner is actually remoted out on the tower. And then down below at the bottom of the rack here, this is a recent addition to the station. This is a 2 kilowatt LD MOS HF amplifier. So this greatly improves our coverage, not just on the amateur bands, but outside of the bands as well. We have some things we do outside of the amateur bands that need that flexibility and power. And then kind of off to the right-hand side to kind of compare different sizes here. This is the old school way of doing things. This is an HF amp originally built by one of our club members, Bill Parker, VE7IX on the island. This is a 4CX 1500B that's capable of running about 2,000 watts from 80 meters to 20 meters. We don't use it that much anymore because it's obviously all manual tuning, but it's a great piece of equipment and it's a conversation starter. So with that, I would want to just since Darryl's here, get his take on position 1 and what we got going on at position 1. Darryl, can you give us a bit of a background on what you got going on here?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Ian. At position 1, we have an ICOM 7300 and P4 Dragon Pactor modem. This radio comes from my home, and I brought it to the club because of the number of antennas and the capabilities available to me. Actually, I'm about 500 meters away from high voltage power lines, and that brings in a lot of noise.
So I noticed we got the CIW 212 call sign up on top of the radio. I know that's our CFARS thing for our club. Tell me a little bit about that, and for the folks on the line, what that's all about.
Oh, sure. For those that don't know, the CFARS stands for Canadian Forces Affiliate Radio System. It's a program that was brought out in '78, actually,
right,
to give our troops abroad a way to reach out to their loved ones back at home.
And we do check-ins twice a week, right? Wednesdays and Sundays?
There's 2 check-ins, one on Wednesday and one on Sunday, one being a regional and one is a national.
I know we're doing Pactor on this station. Obviously, you mentioned the Pactor modem. Why don't we make a quick call here and show folks what that looks like? I know for CFARS we do Pactor. What else do we do we do Vera?
Yep, that's right. We do Vera, and we also do A110, which is a military-specific protocol.
110, yeah.
And it has encryption capability when needed.
So what we'll do here is we'll maybe craft up a message to Miles.
Oh, yeah?
That's probably a good idea. Miles, we're going to send you a message. If you've got your phone, this is a great time to take a listen and get that phone out. We'll send up a message to you here.
Sure. Hello, test. How are you doing? All right. Let's pick a node.
Cool. So which one are you connecting to? You're connecting to N7 LOB?
Yep, N7 LOB. He's only about 290 some kilometers away.
All right, cool.
Yep. Let's bring up the radio. Tune up here.
And which antenna are you on right now? You're on the T380 dipole?
Yep, exactly. It's perfect for this short hop.
3.589 megs.
Yeah, perfect.
Here we go.
Good strong. S9. It's good.
So this is kind of like sending a fax, but over HF, right? We're
Sure.
actually connecting to this node, which is acting as an email gateway, and then it's connecting to a central message server, a CMS that you see on the screen here. And basically we check in with it and say, hey, we've got some messages to send off. In this case, 1, it's going to send that right now. And away it goes at a blistering 1400 bits per second. So we've got a message coming in there, a service message. It's probably a system notification. We haven't checked the email in a while, so.
Yep.
Completed, cool. So it's just that simple.
That's it.
Anything else about position 1?
Nope, that's it.
Cool, man. Well, thanks again, Darryl. I guess in the interest of time, we'll get moving around to the other stations here. This is position 1. We'll hop up and go over to position 2, which is our other VHF station, and work our way down that side of the room. Thanks
Great.
again.
Thank you.
So yeah, position 1 is here, and as we walk around the room, position 2 is the next stop. And actually, as I get to position 2, we have monitor 1 here. This is showing the lightning maps, and you might be familiar with this. It's a great little thing to have up in the radio room. Especially on HF when you're operating, you want to monitor where your static's coming from. It's a great handy tool, especially at the time of the year where you get local static and storms. Really important to know when you need to start worrying about disconnecting things at your station. We have other things up on the screen as well, like CCTV cameras and whatnot. We can show the front door or antennas. 2 stations on this side of the room. This is position 2. This is an ICOM 7000 all mode. It's currently on the RPT repeater. You can hear it there. This station is basically sitting here in conjunction with its brother on the left to operate as a simplex radio. So when we have operations going on, different events, and we need to have VHF repeaters as well as simplex operations, we can do that with these 2 combos. So here we have an ICOM 736 all mode. It's a good old radio that does VHF, UHF 220 and 1.2. This one here is DM710. This is another dual bander. This is actually on our club repeater on MFS 145310. And we have that there because we have our weekly nets we run from this particular position. You can see our net script here on our club webpage. Moving over to this screen here, this is all of our contacts. So we really encourage our members to log into the nets to get active and actually operate as net control. And one of the things I just wanted to show you here, and Richard, VA7RLW, who you heard from earlier at the beginning there, he's been really good at documenting all the stuff as it relates to setting the station up for packet radio and whatnot. It can do a bunch of things. And he's developed guides like this for a number of the stations, and we have these at the different operating positions for that reason. So as we move down the radio room, one of the cool things that everybody asks about in here is the geochron map. And so what the geochron map is a geographic chronometer. It's actually showing us the real-time position of the sun on the Earth. And this is important because it affects HF signal propagation. In other words, where there's sunlight versus daylight, you're going to have differences in signal conditions, and the different frequencies are going to behave differently. So we want to have that up on the screen. It shows us all the 24-hour time. As we come down the radio room here, actually on monitor 3 is our APRS. This is a display we generally leave up, showing us all the local amateurs that have their kind of, this is like geolocation for ham radio, showing us all the local hams, their locations. If they're operating in their vehicles, you'll see that on the screen here. Even some of the weather stations. So you can see there's a guy here, NJD, in one of his vehicles driving around. Carlos, CFK, one of our club members, is up on the map. So this is a great thing to have up, situational awareness. If you're running an event or responding to a disaster, you can have that up on the screen, not dependent on the internet. Actually, over in the patch bay, you might have saw earlier our APRS radio, it feeds that screen. This is position 6. It's running a TS590. The club actually has 3 of these radios. This radio is another HF 100 watt rig. It's driving an TL922 linear. This is a 1 kilowatt linear. And we use this for contest operations. You see N1MM logging software up here, which we use extensively. Keith will give us a bit of a review of that in a minute. Here's part of the antenna rotator controls and band switches that I was referring to earlier at the patch panel, how any station in this room can actually control the antennas and whatnot. We can move this around. We don't have to be relocating this equipment and patching it in physically. We just bring it up on an IP address. Down here, position 7, we call this our get on the air position. This is the position that we have for new hams who are getting familiar with the hobby. For those who are just getting familiar and want to operate 2-meter repeaters, we have a little handheld here. Basic HF radio, again, keeping consistent. We have the same one on the other position. This is another TS590. We leave this radio connected up to an Omni antenna vertical that is multi-banded so that the operator here can really just focus on the basic operating technique. We have a basic hand mic here. They're not worried about an amplifier or patching. And we have available like the procedures and whatnot on the RAC page so they can get familiar with that. We've got that bookmarked. And most importantly, the band plan. So, when everybody's starting off on HF, they're always concerned about where to operate, what's out of limits and whatnot. So we keep this available right next to the station, and that's really important. So with that, I think it's time to head over to position 8 and over there at Keith. V7KW is going to give us a bit of a tour.
Position 8 is a Flex 6700 transceiver with an ACOM 2000 amplifier. The Maestro you see in front of me is part of the training that we use contesting for, in that you can have 2 operators on the same radio. Normally it would not be used at this position, but could be used at another position to enable an operator to learn how to contest. The main idea of the automation that we've put into these stations is to enable almost instantaneous band and mode changes. So if you type in a band frequency, then the station will automatically change not only to that frequency, but the antennas will change, the bandpass filters will automatically change. If I want to change mode, I simply type in the mode and it will change to that mode. And that includes things like FT8, where it brings up the FT8 screens. So the similar type of operation is done on position 5. So at position 5, we have an Elecraft K3 transceiver, the KPA 500 amplifier, and the CAT 500 tuner, which in this case is used to automatically select antennas depending on which band we're on. We also have a bandpass filter, which will automatically change as we change bands. So all of that tracks. Things which aren't fully automated, but which could be in the future, are things like the T2 antenna switch. Right now, if we want to change bands on that switch, we can simply click on it and the bands will change quite quickly. As in all stations, or in any place in the station, we can control the antenna rotators as well as the band switches. I should mention that both position 8 and position 5 could be operated remotely. And to demonstrate remote operations, we'll move to position 4 and Matt.
Thanks, Keith. Hi, this is Matt, VE7ROH, and I'm in my home in Richmond, British Columbia. And I'll be showing you the remote operation of position 4. The VE7SCC station is connected to the internet via the BCWARN network, the British Columbia Wireless Amateur Radio Network. This network connects repeater sites and radio club stations through microwave links back to the University of British Columbia, where we have our internet backbone. The connection path today goes from a rooftop in UBC over to Mount Seymour, VE7RPT, over to Surrey, Concourt Tower, VE7RSC, and then over to Coquitlam, VE7SCC, a total link length of about 54 kilometers. The design for position 4 is to provide the same user experience operating locally and the same as remote. All audio for position 4 is fed through the Mo2 digital audio mixer with a remote web interface. In here we can select the different microphones, inputs and outputs, sound coming from Mumble remotely, where I am, or locally on the RE20 or the headset. All audio from the Mo2 mixes through and then into the Orban Optimod 9300 and then into the transceiver. The transceiver is an Apache Lab Anon 8000 DLE, a software-defined radio with 200 watts transmit power. The radio is operated through the Thetis SDR software. And within the software here, we can select the different transmit and receive antenna ports. There's 3 antenna ports, so you can have transmit and receive selected per band, as you can see here. The antennas available for this position are an 80-meter dipole tuned for 3729 kilohertz for the BC Public Service Net, a rotatable cubic quad antenna with 40 meters through 10 meters. The band select is through another web interface designed and built by Keith VE7KW. I'll demonstrate what it looks like here. Using the Thetis software, you can see the FFT, and as I select a different band, you'll see the signal come up as soon as that rotator moves over to the 40-meter antenna, and you'll see that signal drop down as I move it to the 20-meter antenna, and so on. Rotation, as you've seen, is to the microbit rotator, and it has a web interface, which represents the antenna heading, and we've got presets here for different directions, and we can also fine-tune that with the left and right, or select a heading by typing in a free direction and hitting go. Virtual serial ports allow us to send and receive CAT control from this radio throughout the entire station. Casual and DX contacts are logged through the N3 FJP software, so we can keep a running log for any confirmed QSOs. Radio operation is also controlled through the Theta software. We've got capabilities for Vox and or MOX. We can also send and receive HF calls via the telephone system. So I'll bring that up now and we'll make a demonstration of the information line and how we can run that. So just make an outbound call.
Canadian Coast Guard. This Marine report. Tuesday evening.
And we have the ability to send this out on the radio by either sending the radio into Vox or MOX, and I can manually set that now.
Uncertainty on location is high as model solutions are shifting their position.
There you go. And we'll check in with Phil in the trailer and see how he's doing. Victor Alpha 7, Charlie Quebec Tango. Here is Victor Echo 7, Sierra Charlie Charlie remote. Over.
Hey, good evening, Matt. VE7 Sierra Charlie Charlie remote. VA7 Charlie Quebec Tango. With Phil in the trailer, how's it going with the remote operation?
Very good, Phil. We're just making a demonstration here for the folks on the internet. So back to you. Over.
Okay, good stuff. And congratulations on the high score in the Canada Day contest. Fine business, as they like to say.
Yeah, roger that, Phil. Thank you very much. Yeah, I ran that solo from position 4 locally that day, and I only ran about 2 or 3 hours, so I did quite well then. Thank you very much, Phil. We'll speak to you again later. Victor Alpha 7, Charlie Quebec Tango, Victor Echo 7, Sierra Charlie Charlie remote. Over.
Okay, Matt. Take care. VA7 Charlie Quebec Tango will be clear.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to a tour of our trailer. The call sign of the trailer is Victor Alpha 7 Charlie Quebec Tango. We've had it for a number of years. I believe it was 2008, and about 2 years ago, it was decided we should renovate it and bring it up to modern standards. So here we are in the operating side of the trailer, our radio room, and the racks behind us. So on the other side of this wall is storage. We have 420 amps of batteries back there. We have storage for cables, both RF cables, electrical cables, whatever we need. What you see here on this rail, there's two 27-inch monitors going to go here that will fill that whole space. They're not in place yet, obviously, but they're pretty much ready to go. The computer driving the monitors will reside somewhere in the back of the rack with wireless keyboards and wireless mic. Over my right shoulder here is a cable tray that goes into the back of the rack section through the storage section and over to exit on the roof through waterproof portals. So both RF cable, control cable, and DC cables get out and up to the roof from here. I want to mention the table here, the tabletop that my good friend Gord, VE7 Oscar Whiskey, he wanted to get involved. I gave him this project, gave him a design, and this is what he brought back. So not only did he build a table, but he built some storage areas over here as well. So let's turn our attention to the rack area. Behind me, or in front of me now, are 3 racks, rack 1, 2, and 3. You see a patch bay up here for patching antennas or patching video feeds. An Alinco 220 mode radio, a modem for it. We have the main radios, dual band VHF, UHF, HF, and a modified HF radio, the ICOM 7000. It's been modified to work in the bands, frequencies that the CFARS operate in, Canadian Forces Affiliated Radio. We have a license inside to operate with them and do quite a bit of check-ins on various nets. Below here is the controller for the high Q antenna, which is our main HF antenna that's bolted on the roof. This is the control surface. The whip in the antenna is 102 inches long, so you can't have the antenna up when you're transporting it. So when you arrive on location and you power everything up, you come into here and you've hit the up button. So the antenna is like this, and now it's perfectly vertical. And you're wondering, how do you know when to stop it? Well, there's a limiting switch on the vertical and also a limiting switch on the horizontal. So it stops perfectly every time. There's another modem down here that can be switched from the Kenwood TS 480 to the ICOM 7000. Below that is a 2 kilowatt inverter charger system. And if we just go down to the bottom of rack number 2, you see the negative bus rail right there. And the size of the cable, it's a 2-aught cable, both on the negative side, and will slide across to the positive side. Big cable, big connection. There's a quick disconnect there for inverter disconnection, and over here, a low voltage drop disconnect there. Now, let's go into, I've taken a lot of the panels off, if you haven't noticed already, just to show you some of the cable management and what's behind this. But on the day, it'll all be covered with panels. We have video monitors up here for a PTC camera, which could be mounted on top of the mast, and I'll show you the mast at the end of this little tour. We have a Cisco router switch here, and that will provide connections within the trailer or external connections abroad. Over here is one of my favorite installations in the trailer. It's a Blue Sea Systems power distribution, not only 12 volts, but 120 volts as well. There's still, I'm just going to turn the lights on behind the rack there. There's still expansion in here, but the problem being there's not a lot of distance in the back. You don't want to take gear off. It would be impossible to work on this if you had to add some more switches or circuits to it or whatever you wanted to do. So the solution to that was to make a folding bridge. I call it a drawbridge, and down she comes. And there you go. So if you were going to do some work on it, either add some more circuits or add some more wires and or whatever, of course you'd want to kill the power. There's 120 volts on here live. There's also 420 amps of DC current. So you've got to make sure you turn the power off. In the back, it's all cable managed, so folding and unfolding, you don't have to worry about cables shorting out or getting cut or whatever. And then when you're done your work, you simply fold it up and put it away, and you're good to go. I'm just putting one screw in here to hold it for now. Okay, we're going to go to the outside of the trailer, and I'm going to show you the vertical mast we've got. At the front of the trailer, we have a vertical mast that probably goes up about 35 feet or so. So that'll go up to 35 feet. We could have our PTC camera on top of there. You can pan, tilt, zoom it. You could put a small beam on there. You could put, I don't know, 10, 12, but that might be too many, but you can certainly put 3 or 4 dipoles in there. And with the power output from the front of the trailer, we could have remote stations 100 feet over that way, because they would be able to get some AC power. So that's the tour of our trailer. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please wait till the end of our presentation, and we'd be more than happy to answer them. And now, back to Ian inside the club.
All right, Phil, thanks very much for that. And we're going to carry on through the rest of the room here. As Phil was saying at the beginning of the meeting, the facility is 4,000 square feet. So you see the radio room behind me. And then as we head out towards the back of the property, these are the cable trays that take all the feed lines and coax and rotor cable and Cat5 out towards Tower 3. Tower 3 is about 450 feet away. Kitchen here, the entrance to the building here. We have an office here. I want to take you into the shop. So join me in the shop. In the shop, you'll notice we got a couple of toolboxes in here. We really encourage folks to come down, work on projects. This is where Phil and I keep a lot of our own personal gear. Drawers over here for the other folks. What you see here is a drill press, and down below a chop saw. This is, it gets a lot of work. You can imagine maintaining the station of this size here. We have to be constantly working on different things. Some projects you see here, assortment of different real nice drill bits for different things. MIG, TIG, aluminum gun you see here as well. Phil set this up for a quick demo. It's kind of like Science World. We got powder coating here as well. So we do a lot of powder coating work. And all the panels you saw in the trailer are all done in powder and black powder. A Miller 250 amp Multimatic welder here, so that's the multi-process welder. Got a 60-gallon air compressor in here. We're always doing things and filling up people's car tires, running the line outside the window. A little lathe here. We're doing all sorts of little things. We actually had an insert in here somewhere for our weight. I'll actually grab it. This is one of the weights we made up on the lathe for the air cannon. So when we're launching antennas, this perfectly fits the barrel of the air cannon, and so that's what we do here. So that's the shop. I'll take you over to the next room, which is Wayne's World, as we call it. It's the electronic side of things. So this is where we do the mechanical. And in the next room over here, we've got the electronics workbench. This is where Wayne, VE7ZNU, likes to hang out, Wayne Gallagher. So we have a bunch of stuff in here, bits and bobs. Of course, you can all imagine. Some test equipment, test and measurement here. There's an HP 8920 hanging out down here, and a 4403B spectrum analyzer over here. And then over on this bench here, there's another couple of gadgets. We have a little portable repeater for teaching and coursework. And then this is the little hand crank, when we're showing the theory around power generation from the basic course and magnetism. So little thing like that. So all sorts of fun and games in the electronic shop. Again, solder smoke projects are the ones that always get people attracted and come down on Wednesday nights. So into the meeting room we go. So the meeting room is where we spend, and you'll have to pardon the video feedback here because this is all real time. We have quite a system here that you've kind of seeing in use tonight. It's called vMix, which is a virtual mixer. It's running on this machine here, and down below is the computer that's actually joined to Zoom, and that's where we're feeding out. Over here is a bit of a video patch panel that's currently a work in progress, hence the temporary labeling, but this is where all of our camera feeds in this radio or in the meeting room come through, and all of our PTZ control systems here for the cameras in this room. And as we go over to this side of the room here and kind of wind things up, you'll notice that the microphones in the room here are all set up on auto mixers. So all the mics and the tables here are automatically mixed, so everybody in the club has a front row seat. And then these are the pan tilt zoom cameras. We have 5 of these around the facility. So there's one on every corner, northeast, south, and west. And that's what you're seeing with Neil's and Richard's video earlier. So I think that pretty much concludes our kind of formal tour. With that, I think maybe we'll hand it back up to Miles. I'll go put you up on the full screen, and we'll do some Q&A with anybody who's on the line. We've got a panel. We can bring them up on the screen, the 3 up as well. And I'll hand it back to you, Miles. Yeah, we just think Miles is just switching over. He's switching back to the Zoom feed. They were watching on a high definition feed up there, so let them get all sorted out.
Sorry, Ian, I don't have the same level of sophistication there. I had to jump up and actually poke buttons on the projector.
No, that's all good. Yeah, that's not a problem. Yeah,
although we do have the meeting owl, so
the meeting owl is working well. So with that, I'm going to let.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the.
Yeah, I'm going to let the guys here handle the Q&A with you, and I'm going to go back to my post, if you don't mind.
Okay, Miles, do you have any questions from that end? Do you have any questions from that end, Miles?
All right. Now, did we have anyone in the room have questions?
Just drooling.
I don't know if you caught that, but yeah.
How much for an hour in the seat?
Well, it's amateur radio. It's not going to cost too much. It costs a lot to put it together, but we can't charge for anything. So I'm also...
if our club members are down there.
Could you say that again, please, Miles?
They want to know if they can pop in if they're down here.
Yeah, I was just saying, if our club members come down to Coquitlam sometime, are they able to, could we try and set up a sched with somebody so they can see the place in person?
Absolutely. It's a matter of scheduling it. We're not here every single day, but yeah, please feel free to pop down, and we'd be really happy to show you not only this facility, because we're very proud of it, but we're co-located in this building with the Radio Museum, Spark, which you may have heard. and also EHS, which is adjacent to us next door. But we'd be happy to show you our facilities, and you're more than welcome. Just give us some notice in advance, and we'll make sure we've got somebody here to give you a quick tour. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Just wanted to mention as well, too, that I'm also monitoring the chat window here on Zoom. So if anybody's out there in the ether, feel free to use Zoom to fire any questions at us. Was there anything else in terms of questions from your end, Miles?
I don't think so. I think other than just a lot of envy around the table, I think that's pretty much it from us. I think our jaws are all still on the table. So,
well, you know what? It's go ahead.
Oh, we do have a question. Sorry, Austin.
So you have multiple HF stations within your room there. Can you operate and transmit all three?
Absolutely. In fact, to give you an example, in the winter contest, we put up, I think, 1.6 million points roughly. We were transmitting on 20 meters, for example, both CW and sideband at the same time. We have enough separation between the towers that we can do that without too much difficulty. In fact, Keith and I, KW and I, operate CWT. It's a Morse code contest every Wednesday. We quite often operate within about 10 kcs of each other on 20 meters with minimal interference. Keith will be on Tower 3 on the 20M5, and I'll be on Tower 1 with the 20-meter quad. We were able to simultaneously operate on 10, 15, 20 without any interference. 40 is a bit more dicey. And 80, we tend to have one person on 80, and that's it. Although we do have two 80-meter antennas, one on Tower 1 and one on Tower 3 that we can use in a pinch. The primary 80-meter antenna, which we use for the public service net, kind of runs between Tower 1 and Tower 2, so it does have a tendency to cause some in-band interference. Yeah, Keith, would you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that being able to operate in-band, particularly if you can operate a contest where you're running CW and sideband at the same time, makes a big difference on a station like this. Particularly for something like the RAC contest, where really the aim is to get the call out there and provide some activity. So it makes it a lot easier when you can do that. But when the band conditions were poor and we only had two bands to operate with, it meant we could put 4 stations on the air, which worked out quite well for us.
We had an interesting. Did anybody want to follow up on that with Keith? Okay, we had a question come in on the chat window here, and we had a. Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. Okay, we had a.
Yeah, your audio's a little light.
Okay, can we crank the audio up just a touch? Great. All right. So we did have a question. You bet. Thanks for the feedback as well, too. I mean, this is kind of our first kick at the cat here, and we appreciate the feedback. We had a little bit of issue at the very beginning with audio during the drive up to the site, but once we got a heads up on that, we changed it. We do have somebody come in on the chat window here. It was John, V7TI. He says, how do you control remote operator access as far as band and power privileges are concerned? Well, we're pretty careful about that, and we vet who we allow to access via remote. So there's a process we end up having to go through. Is it wide open to everybody? Absolutely not. Are we pretty careful about who gets what, and we ensure we know what they're doing? Then they're allowed access. At the moment, we really have just 4 people who are coming in. We'll expand that over time. And Matt is on the ANAN, which has a maximum 200 watts at this point, although it will have access to an amplifier shortly. And Keith and I tend to come in remote, but we're both advanced, so that's not an issue. Ian, of course, is advanced as well too, and there you go. Once we open it up a little bit more, and we've got some things to do before we really spend a lot of time opening it up, and that is to ensure that we have proper switching of radios to antennas to amplifiers. Right now, as you recall from the infrastructure presentation, we have a manual switch, a manual patch panel, which we use to move some antennas around with. Once we automate all of that, then we'll have a control system which we're contemplating put into place so that we can actually restrict who gets what when, and we don't have two people trying to talk on the same antenna at the same time. That'll also allow us to control and ensure that people have the right, sorry, I'm looking at Phil here, who's looking at me with distaste. Obviously, I said something he didn't like. Oh, he says I'm fine, okay. All right. So, yeah, we're still working on that. It's a work in progress.
Neil, there's another question regarding your next DX site from John McKay.
If I told you, I'd have to kill you. I'm sorry. Actually, Keith and I are going down to Belize for the ARRL DX contest, CW contest. So I just got my license, actually, V31RK. But in terms of other DXpeditions, we're looking at maybe something in the Marquette, well, somewhere in the South Pacific. In terms of really big ones, nothing at this point that I can even talk about. So I'm getting too old for the really rough stuff. Yeah. Yep, V31, that's right. Bob Holowenko. Bob, did you have any questions you wanted to throw at us? Apparently he needs V31, so we'll have to make sure we have a sched with him. Did anybody else have questions?
Bob's not able to unmute, unfortunately.
Oh, we'll get Bob on the air here in a second. Hello, Bob Holowenko.
Oh, still muted. Hang on. Question from Steve McLean.
Yeah, I can see it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Steve McLean mentioned here, he says, I see you have the green heron rotator controllers. Are those LAN attached and remotely controlled? Absolutely, yes. Keith, can you give us a bit more explanation of that?
Well, the philosophy in the station here is that everything is on a web server, so that no matter where you are, you have access to rotators, antenna switches, some other miscellaneous operations that we're doing. It's all part of the station automation, so that the next level up on that, of course, is that the radios themselves are interfaced into that. And we've done that on 2 of the positions, and we're working on some of the other positions to enable that type of access. There was a question earlier tonight about, do we have something where you can automatically interface all the antennas to any of the radios? No. I call it the God control, and they exist, but not for this station yet.
Not yet. Mm-hmm. Okay. Do we have Bob? No. Okay.
Good
yes,
evening.
Bob.
Can you hear me? So very impressive. I'm glad to see how much things have grown in the last. These have probably been gone for 8 years now. Contesting has always been a big part of it. When can we expect the next multi-multi to happen from SCC?
Well, in terms of a multi-multi, probably not for a while. In terms of a multi-2, look for us on Saturday in the RTTY roundup from ARRL. We try to focus on classes and opportunities to make a significant contribution in terms of points, Bob. When you're running against some of the superstations down in the States, to be perfectly honest with you, we're not competing all that well. You take a look at Craig, as I call him, Craig Doggy, he's a good friend of mine, K9CT. He's probably got $1 million worth of equipment set up and towers coming out the yin-yang. He's now bought the property next door, and he's going to put up a whole identical system for diversity. So we're not in that capability, but we do make a pretty good showing for those classes that we enter and in those areas that we favor. I don't know whether you noticed it in the images from the top of the towers when we were installing the quads. We have an excellent shot into Europe, into Africa, into the United States, into South America. As you'll probably remember, Bob, from being here at the club. Where we suck wind is into Japan. And although, we can work Japan without too much difficulty, other stations in the area here, looking at Sugar Zulu, Sugar Victor, have the height and unobstructed views into Japan. What we've asked the city to do is to remove the entire Ranch Park subdivision, and they've said, no, it's not really an option. So what we're doing, though, is we're burning RF holes in it very, very quickly. So, yeah. So that's the story. Everybody has an area that they do a good job of working into, and there's also an area where you suck wind, and ours is a challenge into Asia. Okay. All right. If there are no more questions, I'm going to toss it back to Phil, and he'll wind things up.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Neil, for that. Hey, Miles, we're going to throw it back to you in a second. Just wanted to know, is the 410 still working? Hello, Miles. You didn't shoot your...
Sorry, yeah, no, it took me a second there. Yes, it is.
Okay, I was worried you might have shot.
He can't hit anything, but it's still
I was
working.
concerned you might shoot your eye out.
That's a little...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little inside joke. Like Ian took us through a tour through the machine shop there, and last year when I was down there, I delivered a 410 shotgun to Lee's dad, and it had a bum firing pin. So I was totally impressed. We came by the Coquitlam club there, and Phil fired up the lathe and basically made a firing pin from scratch. So it worked out great, and it's still working great. It's just that Lee's dad can't see to hit anything.
It's not my...
Which I don't think you can fix with the lathe.
That's not my problem. One thing I forgot to mention earlier when we did the outside tour and all that, this building, which used to belong to the Canadian Armed Forces, resided over in Jericho, I guess around World War II. You probably heard the term military spec, and this building was built to the highest standards of being able to survive an earthquake. So in the 60s, the building was all taken apart and sold to the government and moved here. As you know, we're right on an earthquake zone here that runs all the way from California to Alaska. So the walls, the floor, the ceiling, there's all huge I-beams, steel I-beams up there, as well as 2x6s on edge on the floors for structure and safety as well, because one time you used to be able to drive a forklift in the front door with a load on it and stuff like that. So Miles, thank you to yourself and the club for joining us for this tour. As Neil has said, we're very proud of what we've done in 10 years or so here, and we'll just keep working on perfection. So back to you for a final there, Miles.
Thanks, Phil and the folks in Coquitlam. It's been a real pleasure and an honor to have you guys give us a tour. And I don't know if people realize just how much work went into setting this up on the other end. I know Ian's been working at it on weeks on end, and pretty much all week solid. So, and a whole bunch of other people, as you saw. So I guess what I'd like to do is just have everyone in the room here and maybe online just give a thumbs up, and everyone here just give a big round of applause to the folks down in Coquitlam for all you did. Thank you. And with that, I guess we'll say have a good evening, 7-3, and really appreciate everything. And we'll take a quick bio break here, and we'll start our club meeting in person. Okay. So thanks, Phil, and everyone down there. Really
you bet. Take care, Miles. Hope you guys ever come down here. Give us a little notice, and we'll give you a personal tour. 7-3.